Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's webinar. Hopefully, a few people just joining us, so I'll fill for a minute or two. But yeah, my name is Darren Wright. I'm your host for today's session. It's the second in the Changes Now series brought to you by Summit. Today's session is titled How to Recession-Proof Your Sales Plan. They say timing is everything, and I woke up this morning to a notification, BBC News, saying the UK has bounced back from recession, but I'm sure this is only a temporary measure as we head back into lockdown this month. But in spite of that, we've still got a great lineup of guest speakers today. Just going to share my screen. So as I say, how to recession-proof your sales plan, and our guest speakers today, I'll run you through the agenda. So we have myself, Darren Wright. I'm going to do a bit of an introduction. We've done a bit of research and got some insights to share, and then we're going to jump in with our guest speakers. So I'm going to have a chat with Amit Agnihotri, who is Head of Analytics at eBay. I'll then be chatting with Phil Twigg, who's Head of Acquisitions at M&M Direct. And then I'm going to be bringing in my colleague Ryan, who's going to have a chat with Andrew Studley, who is Group Finance Director at Clarks. And lots to get through there, but if we get through it all and we have some time at the end, we'll bring everyone back on and we'll have an opportunity to answer any questions. There is the Q&A box in the usual place at the bottom of the Zoom app. So do put your questions in there if you want questions answered by any of our speakers today. So as I said, today is the second in a series of events that we've been running, focused on, called The Changes Now, focused on what the fundamental changes that have been happening in retail in 2020 brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you missed it last month, we did a session on peak and the Christmas trading period and how that's going to be different. So if you missed that, you can still catch it on demand on our website. Today, looking at the longer term impacts of a recession, and then next month we're going to be having a bit of a deep dive into technology and how that is reinventing retail. For those of you that aren't familiar with Summit, a quick introduction to who we are. So we are change makers in retail. Why are we here talking about this particular subject? Well, we've been around for 20 years, which in the grand scheme of retail isn't a long time, but in the context of online and digital marketing, it is a fairly long time, and we faced a fair few macroeconomic challenges in that time, but we've still been able to help brands like Argos and Joules grow their digital footprint so that it's now the primary channel for their business. We've also developed technology that can help retailers adapt to changes in market demand. So our marketing intelligence platform Forecaster has various modules in there that adjust bids and budgets according to changes in demand. So for example, there's a weather module that helps you understand if there's an increase in the amount of rainfall or the weather that suddenly improves, that it understands how that's going to impact demand and how you will then adjust your budgets and your marketing plans accordingly. But I guess we've also, more recently in 2020 been, already supporting our clients through a period of immense change, whether that be through better understanding their customers and coming up with new customer plans, whether that's balancing the need to meet increased demand with the challenges of supply chain, or whether it's just being more flexible and trying to be really helpful with things like flexible payment terms. And to support this webinar, we've done some research and some insight of our own. So we took a panel of 500 respondents, broadly representative of the UK market, and asked them about their attitudes towards the economy, towards things like lockdown, and how that's going to then impact their retail behaviours. So when I was prompted with the title for this webinar, so how to recession-proof your sales plan, there was three things that immediately came to mind, hypotheses that I wanted to test. The first of those was that actually, with so much going on around lockdown, and we're back into a full lockdown here in the UK, there's questions like, am I going to be able to see my parents at Christmas? Am I going to be able to spend my birthday with my mates? Is my wedding going to be able to go ahead? And they're the kind of things that customers are thinking about. So yeah, my hypothesis, my assumption is actually people are far too concerned with those immediate questions to be even thinking about the long-term economic concerns. Secondly is this idea of polarization. So there are people like myself who have been really fortunate to be able to work from home as I am today, not and not had an impact in terms of their livelihoods. Whereas there's those who have been either put on furlough, taken pay cuts, or even been made redundant, and been far less fortunate. And the behaviours of those two groups perhaps will be very different. And the final one, with perhaps a bit more hope, is that the recession can actually represent an opportunity. Those that are brave, that potentially have the sufficient cash flow to do so, you know, there may be an opportunity to capitalise on the opportunities that come about. So I'm going to look at each of these three hypotheses and look at the data and assess whether they were reasonable assumptions to make or not. So the first one, are customers more concerned with lockdown than they are with the economy? So we asked our panel of respondents, to what extent do you agree with the statements there on the left? And as you can see, it's this pretty overwhelming majorities for each of them, at least 2/3, agreeing that, you know, they understand how the recession is going to impact their life and it's going to impact the quality of their life. It scares them and they think that hard times lie ahead. And we were able to then overlay, actually, how about people that are still confused about lockdown? So there was 7% of our respondents who said they were still confused about lockdown and how that impacted them. And for those customers there highlighted in the dark grey bars, you can see that a smaller proportion of those customers agreed with those statements, but it's still, you know, 40-50%. It's still a large proportion of those customers are still showing concern about the economy. And if you back that up with the fact that 71% of consumers are more concerned about the economy now than they were when we first went into lockdown in March, I think it's safe to say on that particular assumption, I was wrong. So, you know, what does that actually mean? Well, you know, I think it's fair to say just be considerate of customers' concerns when you're communicating with them, when you're advertising to consumers. Although it's, you know, don't go too far and down the we're here for you kind of generic message that we've seen a bit of earlier in the year. You know, it's important to remain true and relevant to your brand. Onto our second assumption. So is that polarization going to mean, you know, two very different types of behavior that we're going to see? So we can see along the bottom there, we asked customers, to what extent were you impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and in terms of the impact on your livelihood? And you can see that just over half there said, you know, been fortunate enough to have no impact on my livelihood, and then the remainder have either partially or fully lost all of their income, and that 5% figure aligns quite nicely with the unemployment figure that was reported earlier this week. And perhaps unsurprisingly, you've got a very high proportion of those customers that have lost all of their income have claimed that they have reduced both their essential and non-essential spending. But I think what's interesting is those customers on the opposite end of the scale that haven't been impacted, you're still seeing 41% of those customers have reduced their non-essential spend. And also 70% of that customer group have said they're actively looking to save money on their shopping. So yes, we're seeing some polarization, but those customers not impacted are still conscious of the economy and still trying to be a bit more prudent than they perhaps otherwise would have been. So again, sort of wrong on that one. But looking at different categories, are we seeing the same thing? Do we see that polarization there? Well, I think what's important to notice here that actually for the vast majority of categories we've looked at here, is you have to go all the way down to fashion on the right-hand side, where you get more than 50% of consumers saying they've decreased their spend in that category. And it's only the three categories on the right-hand side where there's been physical restrictions in customers' ability to spend in those areas, restaurants and travel, that there's been a real significant decrease. So I think I'm going to chalk that one up as a victory. I think I'm right on that one. But yeah, it's, you know, important to keep an eye on demand for your category, but it's important not to get too carried away that customer behavior hasn't shifted dramatically yet in a vast majority of categories. And then finally, so is the recession an opportunity for those who can afford it? Well, on this particular subject, I'm going to defer to two people who know far more about this sort of thing than I do. And that is the authors of The Long and the Short of It, a seminal piece of marketing effectiveness analysis from the last decade, written by Les Binet and Peter Field. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, there's lots of great stuff in there, but there's one particular concept that I really like, and this concept of excess share of voice, and how that there's a relationship between share of voice, the amount of money you spend on advertising, and your market share. And if you overinvest relative to your market share, you create excess share of voice. If you have a long, sustained period of excess share of voice, that should then equate to market share growth. But do those principles still hold during a recession? Well, actually, earlier in the year, Peter Field published an article addressing that very question, and looked back at the data from the 2008 global financial crisis and saw that those brands that were able to maintain their spend or even increase it, but even maintaining spend at times like this, when others are reducing their spend, maintaining your spend can lead to an increase in excess share of voice. Those that did drive excess share of voice also drove long-term profit growth. But 2008 financial crash, very different to the causes and the reasons behind the recession than we faced in 2020. So again, do the principles still hold? To try and investigate that, I looked at I got some data from Marketing Week on UK ad spend and looked at two behemoths of the UK advertising space, Unilever and P&G, both of whom have taken very different approaches to advertising in 2020. So Unilever, as you can see, slight increase in their ad spend year on year. P&G really pulled back as they've looked to save costs. And then what I've done is look at share of search as a proxy for share of market to see if there's been a correlation there between the impact. And as you can see, actually, then there looks like there is something in it. Unilever seeing a growth in share of search. They're getting more brand presence online. This is particularly looking in female personal care categories, so it's on a like-for-like basis, if you will. And P&G, remaining fairly flat and starting to trend slightly down. So not completely irrefutable scientific proof, but I think it's fair to say it's pretty indicative that what's held true in the past will hold true now and in the future. So again, if you have got the ability to do so, think about how you can maintain investment and continue to engage customers, grow your brand, and then put yourself in the best position to launch out of the recession later next year. So there's our three assumptions and our hypotheses and our results. So what does it actually all mean? I think first things first is don't panic. A large proportion of customers, as we saw, are maintaining their behavior. What's been working previously should continue to work, but there is still lots of uncertainty. So make sure you're planning for different scenarios, and you've got a plan in mind if we suddenly have to drop back into lockdown as we have this month. Advertising, be considerate of customers' needs, take the time to understand your customers. I think social media can be a great tool for that, and communicating with customers on topical, relevant subjects and amplifying that then with paid media. But as I say, really be genuine and relevant to your brand. You still need to be distinctive and stand out in times like this. As we say, continue to invest. I think it's important to track demand for your categories and adjust your investment accordingly. But yeah, still maintain investment in your brand and driving that mental availability, and then also investing in your performance marketing to make sure you capture the demand for customers when they enter the market. But perhaps the biggest takeaway, I think, is just beware any articles or people making unsubstantiated predictions. If I'd have gone with my initial hypotheses, I think I'd have been making some pretty bad decisions. But I looked at the data and found out, actually, I was a bit wide of the mark. Let's listen to the customers. I and everyone at Summit certainly don't claim to have all the answers, but what we are certain of is that we'll continue to do those sorts of things, listen to customers, come up with relevant plans, and continue to spend our clients' money like it's their own. So that's it from me. Very quick run through, and then we'll share all of this information afterwards, and it'll be available on the website. But there's a lot more data behind this that we'll be looking to publish in due course. But it's time to jump into far more exciting people to hear from, our guest speakers. So first up, we're going to be hearing from Amit. I'm going to have a chat with him, and then we'll move on to a chat with Phil, and then lastly we'll hear from Andrew chatting with my colleague Ryan. So Amit, are you there? Hello, Amit. Yes, we can see you.
Great.
How are you doing, Amit?
Good. So I was listening to your kind of a monologue. We don't call it a dialogue, but yes, very, very insightful, and it's in line with what we are trying to do at eBay. So how do you want to proceed? Should I start presenting? Should I start a discussion?
Well, I guess, we've seen in the news this week, eBay, your latest kind of quarterly results are significantly outperforming expectations. Is it fair to say that 2020 has been quite kind to eBay?
Oh yes, I would say it's like many online retailers, we have been blessed with a huge customer growth and huge business growth. The question that now we have is that how can we sustain that growth? So like most of the retailers who are not online, that they are struggling to get on the road. We have a problem which is like, okay, we have a huge momentum. How can we keep most of that momentum? Obviously, we can't have all the momentum, it will go down. But we want to understand how can we keep the best part of that and have not like a windfall, but like a new normal.
Okay, so I guess there's despite the fact it's been successful, there's probably been some challenges that you've faced along the way. And in your role as head of analytics, I'm guessing you're looking at really clever ways you can use data science to try and solve them. So what are some of the solutions and challenges and the solutions to them that you faced this year?
So let's take a step back. March end 2020, like everybody was scared, and before we see a huge increase in sales, we have 2 weeks where we see like our sales fell off the cliff.
Hmm.
Everybody was like very tensed. We have a lot of problems. eBay is an open platform, so we get all kind of problems. People trying to game the system to get the sales. We were seeing a lot of problems in deliveries because people don't know when the item will go. In normal times, like okay, it will take 3 to 4 days for my item to reach to the customers. Now they were not able to predict that thing. How we can solve that problems. Other problems is that how we can increase our share of voice. I really liked your reference to share of voice, and eBay did a lot in Q2, Q3, and also in Q4 to increase their share of voice. And that basically resulted in some very long-term sticky positive behaviors.
Yeah, I guess it'd be good to dive into that now, actually. Then, if you want to start sharing some of those solutions that you found to those
So I
challenges.
don't have, because we are going through a very critical time, so I can't share a lot of material. So what I have done is that I've taken some pieces of research or articles that is open to everyone, and I can share some of those articles to guide through my story.
Yeah, great.
So before I dive into what we have done, I want to spend a minute or two on what eBay is, and these are our latest results. As you are seeing, is that we got very good quarter, and this year has been like quite good. But what I want you to also appreciate the diversity that we have on eBay. We have 1.6 billion listings. People, when I talk to other retailers, they say that we have 10,000 SKUs or 100,000 SKUs. eBay is not strictly going into SKUs, we have listings, and we have 1.6 billion listings. So to manage these listings, which are not properly productized, because like anyone can come and list, is a huge challenge. Also, one thing which is what people think of eBay as, this is an auction website. I just want to highlight that 90% of our items are fixed priced. 80% of them are new, and almost more than 2/3 of our volumes is coming from mobile. So these are some few facts that I just want to share before I just want to go in depth how what we have done to thrive in this crisis. And I've said before, it's like many online retailers, eBay went from strength to strength during this crisis. And if I take a look back and I put all the activities that eBay has done in the last 2 or 3 quarters, I can bucket them in three big categories. And the first category is how we converted this adversity into opportunity using share of voice, example that Darren has just shared. Second one, how did we use advanced analytics to sort out problems at speed and at scale? And the third one, which is very important, is that look at now once we have got all these new customers and increase engagement from our existing customers, how we can sustain this momentum so that we can get a long tail effect. It should not be like one-off effect. We get very good quarters and then again back to normal. Okay. So what we did, so coming on the first part, what did we do to increase our share of voice? And the first thing that come to my mind is you can see the dates on that is that basically 2nd April. The first thing that we did, once we know that things will be going on and we will be supported by the couriers couriers and Royal Mail, particularly in UK, to do our business. The first thing that we did is that we launched a campaign, a PR campaign on Up and Running. And this campaign was all about immediately bringing up small businesses online. And this is basically a genuine effort. It's not like, okay, we are just doing a campaign. We want to be as genuine as possible so that we can say we share your pain and what we can do to get you up to speed. So it's just a campaign name. The second slide is basically we stopped taking fees from any new customers who wanted to join. So all the moms and pops and SMEs who just want to transfer their inventory online and wanted to test online for the first time, we gave them free fees, no fees for the next 3 months. Other thing that we did was there's a lot of charity online and you've seen all the charity shops. Most of these charity shops are offline. So we supported with 1.7 million funding on training and support so that they can boost their online presence. Third thing that we do, we partnered with NHS. So it's not just we are helping SMEs, we're also helping the NHS department to create a new platform to supply PPE. Until date, we have done 40 million orders, and it's still counting, it's still ramping up using this platform. So all these things, all these stories created a very good PR for eBay. And as Darren was saying, is that companies who can have a share, who can increase their share of voice, will benefit over a longer period of time, and we saw these benefits. Let me see what's the next slide. Yes. Other thing is that also you can see the dates is that we didn't do this one-time effort. You can see in Q4 when we see the infections again rising, then we again started eBay to launch pay as you grow scheme, which is not as a steep discount like free for 3 months, but it was like as you do first 100 listings, we give you free. The second 100 listings, we charge you some more. Third 100 listings, we charge you almost normal, and after 500 or 400 listings, you come basically on at par. So this is basically helping the online or the business community, the local business community, to get online and on their feet. And we get a lot of good PR and word of mouth. And I just showing one or two is basically few examples. We can go online and search. Is that the so many shops which said is that because of eBay they were able to survive because they can put the inventory online.
I mean, it's great to hear about you've been able to support small and independent businesses, at a time where they weren't able just to dial up their e-commerce efforts. That's really good. I guess Amit, what would you kind of say is the one thing that you've learned from this year that you'd maybe recommend to those people attending, that would perhaps help with any further uncertainty we're likely to see next year?
So one thing what I recommend is that all the retailers should have an online presence. And what we have seen here is that a lot of brick and mortar stores which doesn't have an online presence, they are increasing their presence through click and collect. So this is basically something which we are also supporting on eBay, like moms and pop shops or other. They always have the click and collect, and basically helps very quickly to ramp for the physical stores to ramp their presence online.
And I guess in your guys as a data science man, what would you say is the one trend to look out for in 2021 in the use of data and data science?
There are so if we look at a data science one, so what will happen and what we have seen as well. So we generally we see who are coming on our platform, then we can profile them. And then this year what we have seen two new profiles which have like predominantly we can put our finger on. Again, this is something different. One is 50 plus, Another one was Generation Z. And we need to understand what are their requirements, because Generation Z, which we have seen huge number coming in on eBay platform, they have a very different requirements, and try to understand what these requirements are.
Okay.
Okay.
So just continuing to use data to understand our customers and be able to be more relevant for them. It's,
exactly.
If it ain't broke, eh?
Great. Yeah. So I'm just aware of the time. Like I have done the first part, and I can just take you a few examples of what we have done on the data science part.
Yeah.
Okay. So before I go into that, and here you can see that these are Google Trends are not doing anything. You can see this is December Q4, our peak, and what we did in April, May, and June is more than that peak. So this is basically the time of summer vacation where everything goes down. But what we have seen is that our traffic or our searches on internet is like more than what we have seen in the peak time. And this is basically what, if we increase our share of voice, we will see our market share increase. Okay. Now, as you know, eBay is an open platforms. The moment we see these huge things, huge traffic coming in, we see some unique challenges, and one of the unique challenges is profiteering. Profiteering is basically a price gouging where people are putting a lot of high price listings. So normal items which will sell for like 5-10 pounds, they will put 20, 50, 100 absurd prices. And this was getting us a lot of bad PR back in the days in the month of March. And you can see all these press releases. And to solve this problem, so we try to solve this problem using two ways. One thing is using product. Product is when you go online and buy something and you see something very high price, we provide you a link, and you can click on the link and say this item is price gouged. The problem is that when we put that link in, we get huge amount of false positive. And also this thing was reactive. So trust teams said it's very difficult for them to look at this at speed. So it basically came back to the country teams is that, okay, we can't control at that point of time using product, but can we do something at speed to use or solve this problem using supply? And that's where me and my team, when they started looking at it, so we set up a quick machine learning algorithms to solve these problems. And then we started looking at the supply sides and supply titles and try to make sure what is the unit price for this. The problems that we were having in that was coming as a face mask. So basically I've done a normal search, face mask surgical, and then I put a filter on highest price. And you can see the highest price of face mask is 32,950. A problem that we were facing because we have so many listings, anybody can list in any combinations. These are called bulk listings, 50,000. The second one is 1,200 boxes of 50. The third one is 100,000. Fourth one is 10,000. It's very difficult to look at these combinations. So from the combinations of around 5,000 before, we have like more than 200,000 combinations. Main thing is how do we solve using data, and that was really important. And that was moving at a speed, solving the customer problem before it came too late.
It's fascinating, Amit. Yeah, I guess, and using machine learning for those kind of pricing analytics is, I guess, something a lot of people could be thinking about in terms of, especially as people are going to be looking to, during a recession, looking to kind of rein in their spend. I think finding that optimal price to be able to maximize sales is really important. Right. I think we need to kind of wrap it up a little bit there, just because we've got a fair bit more to get through. But really fascinating stuff, Amit. Thank you very much for sharing, and look forward to seeing more of what eBay do next year, and especially in the ways that you're continuing to help kind of small and independent businesses. It's really good. Thank you.
Perfect.
But moving from one kind of major online retailer to another, we're going to now chat to Phil Twigg, who's head of acquisitions at M&M. Are you there with us, Phil?
Hello, good morning.
How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Very well.
Good. So, tell us a bit about how 2020 has been for M&M Direct. What sort of things have you had to cope with?
Well, I'll park COVID for a second. So February, we had really heavy rainfall. So we're based in Herefordshire on the Welsh border. It's the land that time forgot. And both our warehouse and our head office flooded in the space of 12 hours. Both sites were on a floodplain, so we learned some lessons there. But yeah, that was pretty catastrophic for us. So it effectively knocked our business out for about a week. So we had to effectively turn the site off, and we weren't transactional for a 7-day period. And so that was a pretty great start to the year for us. And then a month later, of course, COVID happened. So it's been a massive amount of disruption. Thankfully, we've come out of it the other side, and we're now similar to kind of Amit's story, I suppose. We had this wonderful kind of period of growth. But yeah, initially at least, it brought about a number of challenges.
And I guess during that period, then when I'm guessing you had to cease trading for a little while. What was your approach to kind of keeping customers engaged, and how did you do so there?
Yeah, I mean, that was something that has really kind of made a big difference in terms of the kind of social side of things. So yeah, I mean, like I said, we weren't able to transact, or customers weren't able to transact rather. And so we still wanted to firstly keep customers updated as to what was going on. We didn't want to make the effort to communicate. We wanted to make the effort to communicate rather. I think some companies, when they have something terrible happen, they kind of bury their heads in the sand and kind of down tools for a little bit, but we didn't do that. So we firstly kind of used our social channels primarily to update customers as to what was going on in a kind of fully open way, which customers really responded to. So we've got a huge amount of positive sentiment off the back of that. And it really kind of solidified the community, I suppose, that we had, particularly on Facebook. And then from that, we started to produce engaging content rather than the kind of BAU standards sales messaging that we would normally do. And so from that, we kind of built a bit of a foundation of engagement and using social in a completely different way than we would a normal sort of CRM tool or marketing tools. And then so when COVID hits and you see a deterioration in demand and disruption, of course, to the business, we're able to kind of be far more agile in that regard and keep the engagement going throughout. And again, I think our customers responded really well to that. So in terms of engagement now and the community, it's as strong as it's ever been.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and great to take an existing channel and pivot it really quickly to be able to respond to the challenge. You mentioned then kind of later in the year you've benefited from increased online demand and in specific categories. Is there anything you did differently from a marketing point of view to capture that additional demand? Were you able to maintain efficiency and things like that? So how did you go about that?
Yeah, I mean, we're quite fortunate in that a lot of the marketing that we do is in-house, and so we can be quite reactive to the demands of the market. So initially you have the kind of panic buying of everyone shopping for toilet rolls and things, and then when they're confined to their house, suddenly people want joggers and loungewear, and that's when we kind of talk about the sort of the stars aligning for us, in that we have this huge supply of comfy loungewear and a massively receptive audience. So I suppose the reactiveness of the business, both offline in the sense of the warehousing infrastructure. I mean, that was something that had to be addressed pretty quickly just to deal with the demand. and then from that, then flowing through to the marketing as well. That kind of quick kind of decisions can really make a big difference, or has made a big difference.
Yeah, I've certainly, for one, welcomed the ability to spend more time in my joggers this year. So yeah, that's I've definitely been one of those people in that market. So have you seen anything, apart from maybe individual categories, have there been changes in customer behavior that you've seen over this time? And are there any that you expect to stick as we hopefully get back to a stage where stores are reopening next year and so on?
Yeah, we internally, we've kind of talked about the kind of COVID cohorts. It's kind of a term we've coined recently. And what we've seen is those new customers that have come in from lockdown onwards, lockdown 1, I should say, onwards, the retention rate of those customers is far stronger. So, Amit mentioned the kind of new normal, and it does seem that not only are we able to attract a large number of new customers through this period, we're also able to keep them as well. And I suppose that's one of the primary focuses for the next 12 months, is to be able to keep those customers and keep them coming back. But early signs are that's really true.
Great. So that's the kind of key plan for 2021, is just to shift, I guess, from acquisition to retention, or is it still about bringing on new users as well?
Well, yeah, I think it's a happy blend of both, I suppose. I don't think we can ignore the top of the funnel. I think we can focus on the bottom of the funnel to a degree, but yes, there's a blend of both. And then going into next year as well, we're doing a lot of offline work at the moment to be able to export to new markets. So I think whilst we've got a really strong base in the UK at the moment, I think there's more we could be doing internationally.
Yeah, great. And what about pricing? Are you going to do much around pricing with at a time when customers are perhaps looking to tighten their belts a little bit more? Or, I mean, you guys are got a fairly good value proposition anyway. But yeah,
I think it's probably played into our hands a little bit. The fact that we are a value retailer, we haven't had to be too aggressive in terms of our how we mark down because of the increased demand in the market. So our pricing has always been hugely competitive and will continue to be so.
Great. So final question for you then, a similar one to what I asked Amit, but yeah, what's the one thing you've learned this year that you'd recommend to other people, in terms of dealing with the uncertainty that we faced?
I suppose it's the main thing is, for me, is just being agile enough to deal with quick changes in demand. I mean, I think you go back to the lockdown 1, and you saw a huge deterioration in a number of days following the governmental announcements and things. And I think you have to be so quick to be able to deal with things in order to preserve profit or what have you. And then similarly, it goes the other way as well when demand increases. So I think you've got to have a constant eye on the data and then be agile enough to deal with it. I don't think you can just sit back and things.
Yeah, brilliant. Yes, certainly in line with what we're seeing in some of the research we're doing as well. So, listen, that's really fascinating, Phil, and I'm glad to see you kind of coming out of what's been certainly a challenging first half, and good luck for peak and beyond. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And going from a pure play e-commerce retailer, I'm sure you're now dying to hear from how a traditional high street retailer has been dealing with the challenges of 2020, and I guess also how a finance director is thinking about the recession. So I'm firstly going to hand over to my colleague Ryan. Hello, Ryan.
Hey, Darren. How you doing?
So Ryan, you're going to have a chat with Andrew. So do you want to just give us a bit of background as to why you're taking the interviewee's chair off me here?
Sure. So, morning, everyone. I'm Ryan Thomas. I'm the managing director here at Summit. Before I came to Summit, I spent about 25 years in retail. And for 8 of those, I was lucky enough to work with a guy called Andrew Studley. Andrew, are you there?
I am here. Good morning to you. My video seems to be switched off by the host, so hopefully you can see me soon.
Hopefully we can sort that out. So thank you for joining us, Andrew.
No problem
I'm
at
sure
all.
Andrew won't mind me saying that he's a seasoned pro when it comes to retail finance.
Absolutely.
He's worked at board level across many retail brands, including Comet, Darty, there you are, Kingfisher, and now is the group finance director at Clark. So Andrew has kindly agreed for me to ask him a load of financial and strategic questions on how he and his board colleagues are operating in these very challenging times. So Andrew, if it's okay with you, I will fire away and start asking you a couple of questions. So this year has been a particularly challenging one for us all, and the retail sector in particular, and those who have physical stores like yourself have disproportionately suffered during these very uncertain times. As a large global multi-channel retail business, what financial strategies have you adopted to protect your business and to ensure that you come out of the pandemic in really good shape?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we've all been through recessions over the past, but COVID, it has been one unprecedented learning experience. Priority number one for us has been protection of customers and colleagues with so many on the ground. I chair the risk committee, so that was absolutely the absolute priority. But it didn't take long before we had to get a total grip on our costs, and more importantly than ever, cash. Clark's, unlike many of the businesses on this call, some at 20 years, Clark's is 195 years old this year. Wow. So it's one of the oldest and most trusted businesses, both in the UK, importantly in the UK, but globally, and yeah, huge brand in footwear. We had already started, fortunately, going on to a transformation journey, as you would expect with any business that's 125 years old. Bad habits kind of grown around you, silos, duplication of effort, stock management. So we were already with a new CEO underway with a new transformation journey to really execute and simplify the business model effectively. But at the heart of that was simplifying, but getting the customer at the front of our journey, but equally built on reducing cost and working capital. So that put us in a good stead. And without that going into COVID, we would have been in a lot worse place. But the business model is built around designing our products, which are cult, which are things like the Desert Boot, Wallabies, which are really, really popular with the trend-setting social media type. But the core underlying comfort product that we offer, and then the price entry essentials, lower price product that we bring to market. So that was bringing us into how do we get to market in the right, every market through the right channels, whether that's retail, outlet, and of course the growing and very important e-commerce channel. So all was good with that plan until COVID. We had to close our over 400 stores, including franchise stores in the UK and the US, and of course most of our wholesale operations are active retailers on the high street as well through US and Asia. So what actions do we have to do? Most importantly, we had to get hold of inventory. We had just launched our spring-summer season, so with no demand. So we had to actively work to how do we make that product last, and probably a lot of retailers will be seeing spring-summer 21 be spring-summer 20 reinvented. So, but we had to work through autumn-winter, which is boots rather than sandals and slippers. So it took a huge getting on top of inventory and the stock, because that's where our working capital drain sits. So buying control was essential, but selling surplus inventory. But then getting hold of every discretionary cost, and including marketing. We had to stop, pause, and reflect and rebuild what we thought was right, because we were in a very unprecedented circumstances. But whilst cost was important, cash was king, and terms and extended payment terms with all our suppliers were really important. And it didn't take long before we were in a refinancing exercise, and we worked with our banks, our pension schemes, and you would have seen last week that we have announced an injection of 100 million of new equity coming into our business, diluting our family shareholding, but it's basically going to put us on the right footing to go through into the next 200 years. I don't think many UK retailers would have investment coming in like we've just announced. So we've learned loads. We're now in a better place, but it's been a full-on 9 months.
That's brilliant, Andrew, and I think there's a lot that people can take away from that. So many retailers are preparing themselves for the important peak period I'd imagine that there are many people on this webinar that are worried about the impact that the pandemic will have on shopper behavior, coupled with the possibility of further lockdowns. Clarks, being a shoe retailer, you guys have had your peak in the summer holidays during the back to school period. And given that you've just experienced peak in the pandemic, do you have any advice, things that have worked, things that didn't work, and anything you've learned during that sort of your peak period that you can kind of, you know, give to the audience?
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, you're right. If there's one thing that Clarks really stands out for, particularly in the UK, it's kids, and back to school is our peak. So we still have over 50% market share there. It's, you know, most of the people on this call, I'm sure, remember their childhood and going through Clarks. So yeah, our peak was really important. Of course, coming out of COVID, the stores were only reopening in June, and Scottish back to school starts in the end of June when they go back. So the back to school period was right upon us. Our peak was right upon us from June, and it goes through to the beginning of September. And the challenges that come with that, and I'm sure this is common to a lot of other retailers going to their peak, is that we've got small stores. We have to work with social distancing. We even had the challenge of, would school ever go back? You know, that was a real challenge at that time. So we had to really think differently and put our customers, put our customers' heads on and work out what would be the difference and how would we make a difference. But we have one bit of pent-up demand. One thing that does go in our favor is that kids' feet continue to grow. So there was real pent-up demand. And in the summer, it seems a while ago now, but there was a lot of post-COVID optimism. So we had a little bit of optimism going into the product, but recognizing that there wasn't necessarily a school to go back to, we had to think about other products, other alternative product options, casual wear more than we probably would have done in the past. But get our stores lined up to be able to deliver to customers' needs. And little things like moving from 2 meters to 1 meter plus made a big difference. But we had to implement promotions. How would we guarantee some form of returns if children bought, and that we needed then, with the uncertainty, to have some form of fit guarantee going forward. Appointments were a tremendous benefit for us. How do you take the pressure off the Saturdays, which would tended to be obviously the biggest, and Sundays be the biggest days, but working appointments through a working from home environment, people working more from home, just ease the operational pressures and put, you know, parents could come with their children at a point in time and be fitted and be out the door without hassle. Virtual appointments. How do we do shoe guides and measurement online? Things like just selling the foot measurers, a truly important accessory, which allowed us to really drive online, but, you know, and do sort of, but it is a fitting experience, but our online proposition was hugely important, and we more than trebled our online business through people buying online and getting that marketing, the research, the accessibility. But all around, it was one big team effort, getting people working collaboratively from sourcing through to supply, through the back office and head office to drive what was actually a tremendous outcome. We grew the business in a period where many said we wouldn't.
Yeah, I think online appointments is something that everyone's struggling with a little bit as to how that works. But I mean, during uncertain times, Andrew, you're a finance man. One of the easiest lines to cut on the P&L is the advertising line. We certainly did that in days gone by.
Yes.
You must have experienced a decline in physical store sales like most people on this call, and probably a significant increase in web transactions. Are you continuing to invest in advertising? And if so, which channels?
Yes, we are. Of course we are. But at the time, we stopped because it was discretion, it was cash, and we had to work out how to prioritize. As I say, we almost stopped, rebuilt, work out the customer dynamics, and reinvested. But performance marketing has been central to our spend, and driving the brand through social media and press advertising. But, you know, social media is a fantastic media for us, and using influencers through the wider Instagram level. But people like Alexander Skarsgård, Keely Halls are perfect ambassadors for our brand and able to support and promote the product. So getting that combination right, real focus on performance marketing, social media. And delivering the added value services as well. So not, you know, it's the message rather than just the advertising. So
I suppose it's easier to invest when you can see the ROI almost immediately. So those performance marketing channels very important. I've got one more question, Andrew, if you bear with me. Your year end is coming up at the end of January, which is in line with most retail business, I'd imagine. And you're probably in that process of finalizing your budgets for next year. How on earth do you budget for next year when this year has been so disruptive, and next year, who knows what's going to happen with the virus and the vaccine and everything like that? It must be a very, very tricky thing to do. How do you go about doing that?
Well, you're right. It's very difficult. Almost certainly we'll get it wrong. And so I think the important thing is to build in flexibility and contingency planning.
Yeah.
As I've said earlier, we've had to work with our banks and financiers, so we've built quite robust financial models looking forward, and so we've got some thoughts and processes working into how we manage things. But we're in a lockdown now. How long is it going to go on for? Are there going to be more of them? We need to be prepared. We've learned a lot. But the channel mix, we are working on the basis that our store channel will be lower and our internet channel will be higher. How much is like you say, very difficult to judge, but we're working that flexibility. The most important thing is to go into the year fairly prudently, I think. You would expect a finance man to say that, but tighten your costs, tighten your cash, working much more flexibility on inventory and supply and flexibility where we can. Clearly, we've got long lead times because most of our product comes out from Asia, but working very disciplined way to play to our strengths. I mean, part of our announcement of the new equity injection is that it is conditional upon doing a retail CVA in the UK, and that works well for us because it can allow us to reduce what is the most expensive cost in our business, being property and people, and so it allows us to we're moving towards a turnover rent model. So having rents that are linked to turnover. So if turnover is better, both we and the landlord benefit from that. If the turnover is lower, we share the pain effectively. So we're doing all we can. As I say, we're sure to get it wrong, but it's a difficult year to plan for. But I think we're in a reasonably good, flexible place.
I don't think I've ever seen a retail budget that's right, Andrew, at the beginning of the year, and certainly next year is going to be probably one of the hardest things. So, Andrew, thank you so much for that great insights, really useful stuff for people to take away. I'm just going to hand back to Darren now, who's going to facilitate a quick Q&A with our panel.
Thank you very much, Ryan, and thank you, Andrew. It was really fascinating, hearing a finance man's perspective on what the crazy world we live in right now. So yeah, it's good to keep you on, Andrew, and Phil, and Amit, if you can come back and join us. There's a couple of themes that have been pretty consistent across all of those that I'd like to kind of just explore in a bit more detail. And then the first of those is that ability to be agile. I think all of you touched on that. Being able to quickly respond to sudden changes in demand or sudden restrictions that are put in place, around social distancing in stores. So what is it around, you think, around whether it's culture, whether it's how you organize your people, around processes? What do you think is a really important way to enable that agility? And I guess, Andrew, I'll come to you first on that one.
Yeah, as I said earlier, the heart of our business transformation is around putting a simpler core structure in place, removing duplication, but simplification is absolutely central to our process. We're a global brand, but we've built up inconsistent global practices. So we need to it's not centralized, but it's more bring in place a common process and a common way of working. And that's just simple. But it is difficult, more difficult for a bricks and mortar retailer because of the inherent cost that goes with running that operation.
And Amit, how about you? How do you encourage that attitude towards agility?
What we have done in eBay is that we make a kind of a small teams, like very agile teams. Basically, we have this one issue, and we make a small agile teams, easy for us based on what our organization structure is. But this is a problem, and then we have like one people from each department. Make a small agile team, and then we start solving that problem, and then we get it going. So basically, small grouping will help from each department.
Okay. And Phil, anything more you can add in terms of how best to be
Yeah,
agile?
I think communication is one of the key things. I mean, it's been really hard keeping the lines of communication, particularly across departments. It's very easy to kind of make decisions within your teams because you're chatting all the time, you know, Skype or what have you. But then when you trying to bring in people from external departments, it's really quite tricky to keep those levels of communication going. Whereas in an office environment, you normally just pop over or give them a quick call. So I think trying to maintain communication levels through this period is kind of a tricky thing to get right.
Yeah, definitely, and definitely harder when we're having to do it all via Zoom or Teams or whatever it is. Yeah.
I will second that. What Phil is saying is communication is very important. It was like a very streamlined communication. This is what we want to do. 3 things that we want to do, or 4 things, and that's what we need to focus on. Every team was realigning themselves to look at in 1 or 2 of those 4 key areas.
There's almost being really clear on your goals and your shared goals, not just your own personal objectives. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. And then another point that's been kind of brought up by all of you again is using that idea of using data to understand your customers and tapping into that. So is there any particular data sources or particular sources of insight that you've tapped into this year that you'd recommend? And I guess it will stick with you on that one as our data expert as the group.
So what we have been doing, so we have, like in eBay, we have very good data sources of what our customers are doing, but we have an insight panel. And basically then we go to our customers, and we can go to new customers or engaged or people who are about to churn. We go back to them to understand what they aspire from eBay. And then we see what they aspire from eBay and what eBay is currently presenting. We see the gaps, and then we started looking at. Like one of the examples that we are doing in eBay right now is brand outlets. Because people, Generation Z, who has come to the platform in huge amounts, they want to go to brands. They don't have the patience to go for auctions. They want to go to brands, cheap brands, and have that thing. So basically, we have a retail outlets or brand outlets like we have in UK everywhere, and then we created a section on eBay website to have this retail outlet shown very clearly to these customers.
Okay. And Phil, for you, what are the key data assets in terms of understanding your customers?
We've kind of been going through a massive project over the last 18 months in bringing everything together through BigQuery. So all of our data is on the cloud now. We're in a fortunate position that we don't have any stores, so it's relatively straightforward for us to do. But that's enabled us to leverage so much more data than we've had before. So that's kind of been a massive thing, particularly when looking at customer segmentation and how that's performed through COVID. That's been really, really powerful.
Great. Andrew, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think our history and our data sets make us behind the curve. I would, being quite frank, I think we're behind the curve on some of the data insights that we get. But fundamentally, our restructure around making the customer first and putting a segmentation, as Phil says, central to the way we work, gives you that better thought process as to how you look to how the markets drive in each country and channel that you operate in. So, but of course, customer data, and we've had to pay for some extra research rather than having it from our own systems. But it's hugely important to make our strategy work.
And often an underrated investment, I think.
Yeah, no, agreed.
So,
I can't
so anyway, look, guys, I'm sure we could carry this on for hours. I'm certainly, finding it really fascinating. But unfortunately, we are 1 minute to 12, and we are out of time. But I want to say big thank you to you guys for your time and for sharing your insights with us. Wish you all a good luck for Christmas period and into 2021. Quick reminder for everyone, just that. This is, as I said, the second of a series. There you can join us next month for our next webinar on how technology is reinventing retail. We'll have the guest speakers announced in the coming days, but it will be another exciting lineup. And for anyone who's missed any of today's session for any reason, it will be available on summit.co.uk for you to catch up on. So yes, thank you very much, everyone, and we will hopefully speak to you all soon.